welcome to the Bee Formless podcast, Flow Driven CEO. Today I have a great conversation with Colleen Pimentel. Have I got that right, your surname, Colleen?
You absolutely got it right.
Cool, because I always want to check that before. I hate to say the wrong name or whatever before we jump on into it. Tell us a bit about you, because from what the research I've done, you've got a fascinating background, and I'd love you just to introduce a bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me on the podcast. So excited to be here. I think we're in different time zones, but
Yeah.
I have actually a very diverse background. I started in finance of all places. I
Wow.
was a controller, assistant controller at one point, and we started the company that I worked at. We started like implementing a accounting system, and I helped to manage that. And in the process, I fell in love with the analytics of and the IT portion of that. So once that was done, I was like, I want to go back to the accounting stuff. And that got me into technology.
Right.
From there, I moved into Oracle and I started implementing systems across North America. Then I joined the development team and actually led a team that was building products, went into customer engineering, did business development across North America, eventually became a sales rep,
Wow.
led yeah, it keeps going. Eventually left and led sales, marketing, and operations at a startup. Then moved to Google, where I am right now. But as a side hustle, I actually focus on go to market.
Yeah.
And what I do and what I spend my time with is helping technical founders, or really any founders, of SaaS B2B companies or Web3 companies with go to market. Because what I find is they usually have like this really great idea, this really great product, but it stays just this great product unless you can execute it and get it to market. And that's what I help them with.
Oh, wow. Wow, wow, wow. What an incredible background. And the fact that you're at Google and then you also got this side hustle. It's so interesting. And the fact you're talking about systems, I'm trying to work out where do we start. So I'm keen just to kind of explore a little bit around what you're doing with Google before we jump on into the side hustle.
I am focused in sales at
Yeah.
Google, but I also help in their startup space. So they have a bunch of accelerators there,
Yeah.
and I help from an advisory perspective
Yeah.
for those startups for go to market.
Cool.
And then the day job is sales itself.
Yeah, okay. And so talk to me a bit about the side hustle, because it feels like it's bigger than just a side hustle in terms of, what you're doing with founders. And there's so much to unpack here in terms of, I guess, I'm a founder myself, and you sometimes get stuck with your product and, the go-to-market strategy around it. What do you see the most with these founders in terms of their blocks and getting their products out there, like, in terms of holding them back? And then what do you do around, how do you unblock that, the blocker, if you like, with them?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There are a number of blockers, and that's exactly what I call them too. I call them
Oh,
blockers.
cool.
But the biggest blocker I believe there is, and where I kind of focus, is on understanding your ideal customer profile. And when I say that, I mean really understanding who
Yeah.
are they? How do they think? What do they eat? I mean, you don't have to get down
I
into
love
what
that
they
though.
eat,
What do
but
they
it's
eat?
like
Like,
getting,
yeah,
yeah.
cool. Sorry.
But it really gets into you have to be really empathetic and you have to have positioning that actually moves them.
Yeah.
It's no longer like years ago, you could just have generic messaging. You
Yeah.
can no longer have that at all. You have to really get into their heart
Yeah.
and make them feel something, right?
Yeah.
And I think in today's market, quite honestly, the market is so bloated and
Ugh,
crowded with all of these solutions
tell
that
me
are
about
out
it.
there.
I find it
Exactly. And
overwhelming. Yeah, I actually find it quite overwhelming, even from a founder myself, in terms of, and sorry to interrupt you, but I think there's a really interesting point and tension you talk around there. You call it bloated. I love that language. I use saturated, but there is
mhm.
like, it's just, there's so much out there. And now with AI in the mix, like it's almost like, and you're talking about intimately knowing your ICP, if you like, there's kind of that tension, isn't there, in terms of the AI component to it, but then how do you bring in that human aspect to it? And so when you're talking about this bloated, and I love your thoughts on this, that I kind of really, because my background's advertising marketing as well, I'm like, I
Mhm.
can't be like that. But, like in terms of putting just, a message out there or a product out there, unless it's actually going to serve a purpose to the customer or the consumer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Having that market fit is so important. Um, And I think that's kind of all wrapped around, right, in this initial figuring out who your ideal customer is. And when you're first figuring that out, that might not be your ideal customer. And I
Mm,
guess my process and my methodology is you got to test it. You just have to keep testing and ideating on this value prop and this ideal customer until you get it. And there's a lady, actually, I just put a post out about her. Her name is Susan,
yeah.
and she has a company called LifeQuep. And I met her a couple of weeks ago, and I suggested, like, with the ideal customer and the value proposition, to use LinkedIn to do A/B testing to figure out what resonated. And she did. And within a week and a half, she went from 12% conversion rate, which was already amazing, to
Yeah.
over 19.
Oh my
And
goodness.
I'm like, a week and a half. So it's just a testament to the fact that it's important. And I think now more than ever, it's important to actually test and validate what you think
Yeah.
and not be scared to change things.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that you've seen that
Oh,
yourself
yeah.
as well.
And it's funny you say that, because this is really it's a really fascinating conversation, because like, how many times can you change? Like, what's your view on this? Like, I mean, like I suffer from a bit of perfectionism, so it's practicing that imperfection, testing, learning. I spoke to someone about this last week, and they were like, B, it might take you 2,000 goes to get it completely right, but that's okay. And yet I'm like, I've got to get it right the first time. Do you know what I mean? Like, do you have is it just keep iterating and iterating till you land it?
I I honestly, yes. And I know that that is really hard. And I think it's a mind shift change,
Yeah.
right? The mindset change of, you're and just realizing and setting expectations that this is just validation. And every time that you go and play with some characteristics, you're tweaking that messaging and you're actually learning. So
Yeah.
if you can think of it as not failing, but learning and growing in the process,
I love that.
it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
So it's really changing the mindset of the founder itself.
Yeah. And so do you do a lot of work on that in terms of unblocking their mindset so that they can start to just test? Like, what are some of the, you know, tips or tactics you use to shift their mindset?
That is a great question, and shifting mindsets it does not come very fast. It's
No.
something over time, and the person has to believe in it and want to do it and see that growth. And what I have found is if I give them examples, real life examples, like the
Yeah.
one I just told you about Susan, I
Yeah.
could also tell you the story about Nick, who I also worked with, who was 100% like, I got this. I have the customer. I know the ideal customer. I know the value proposition. Yet he didn't get a new customer in 1 year. There was no
Wow.
revenue, like new revenue coming in. But he was like, there's no way that this is wrong. And we got on a call with a prospect, and lo and behold, it was very evident on that call that the messaging was not resonating that he thought was working.
Yeah.
So telling people those stories and then telling them like what the other stories could be, showing them those examples, that helps them to change.
Yeah, yeah, I call that feedback with positive intent. Like it's always got to be about this positive intent because it's ego as well that we're playing with here, right? Like we have in our, like I know I get caught up in this at times too, where I'm like, no, this is what it is because I've created it and I think I know what it is. But then it's almost like, actually, you're going to have to go and evolve it again. And it's just like, oh my gosh, how many times do I have to evolve, the messaging or whatever before you land it? But it's that, like you say, it's that constant testing and iterating to get yourself there.
Yeah, and you'll know. I mean, you're never going to get like it at 100% per se, but it's good enough when you're starting to see the rates go up.
Yeah.
And then you have to get it out because I'm sure you've seen this yourself. In a couple of months, you got to redo this thing all over again, right? You always got to be
Yeah.
testing and revisiting because there are so many new players coming into the market, especially with AI that you just described. It's disrupting everything. Once a value proposition made a lot of sense with AI, now it doesn't. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and so what's your view on AI? Like, do you think it's a good thing? Like, do you think it can enhance working through who your ideal ICP is? Like, what's your view on, yeah, AI, based on also the fact that you have such a huge background in tech, etc. as well?
I think that we are at a pivotal stage of technology where everything is changing right now. And I think it's changing for the better. I think with every pro, you can see a con. It like in history, you can always see both sides of things. But I think if people are not embracing AI, you need to embrace AI because it's not going away, right?
No.
And it's totally changing the game. And so, what would have taken weeks and weeks and weeks of time, literally, even from a messaging perspective, even from a lead gen perspective, can really be like put down to like a day to 3 days, what used to take 3 days. That's
I know.
like a 10 times savings. So I really appreciate AI. Here's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, I'd love to know that.
AI, yeah, AI almost makes things perfect. Do you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so are we going to get it? It's a question I pose to you. Are we going to get to a point in time where the messaging that goes out is so perfect that people no longer look at it because it's too perfect? And then all of a sudden, the messaging that isn't perfect is what stands out.
I absolutely love that so much. And it's a breath of fresh air because I'm all around authenticity and being real and being like conversational, like we're doing right now, right? And you've actually really tapped into something for me in particular because I know I use AI all the time. I did an 8-week course through the US back in 2023 to get my head around it. But that course was all around, efficiencies and productivity of AI, but there is still that need for human intelligence, human potential, that whole piece. And I love what you're talking about here because I'll collaborate with it. But then I'll also find, and because, I do have that perfectionism in me, I'll just keep going and going and going at it because I think I have to keep making it more and more perfect. And actually, you've actually just tapped, like I said, you've just tapped into something because I hadn't thought about it that way. And yeah, when you talk about this bloated market, etc., that's interesting also because it's like you say, it's the people who are more real, authentic, less polished, if you like are going to stand out longer term. And I intuitively feel that myself. So it's nice to hear that you're coming from this space and place as well.
Yeah, I guess that's my philosophy in life, and maybe that's why we vibe because we're vibing really well.
Oh, that's good to know.
But
I call it flow. I call it we're in a conversation flow state right now where we're just flowing.
Yeah. Sorry, I should have used flow, not vibe.
That's all
But I
good.
think that being authentic is the most important thing in business, regardless. Um, I actually have not always been authentic. I am now,
Yeah.
but I haven't always been. I haven't been in environments where I could be. I
Mm,
think when I moved to Google, that changed everything for me.
mm.
Um, and it makes a big difference because when you're real, things just flow. And when you're not real, you're guarded. Plus, people can see through when you're not real. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you're
Like
also
it just doesn't work.
yeah, I also think you're more rigid. If we think about where, linear versus non-linear, you're more rigid, you're more controlling, you're more holding yourself
Yeah,
back. So I've been in that space and place as well in terms of in the past, I probably haven't been my true authentic self as much. But now that I am, I'm almost a little bit like, and I won't swear, but I'm almost like, I am who I am. Like, this is me. This is me as a leader. This is me as a business owner. Sure, I've got to get that messaging right from an ICP perspective, etc. I absolutely believe that. But I've got to do it in a way where I'm coming through it, right? Like my language and how I'm talking, my tone, etc. I think that's what we're talking about here. And when you are able to be in an environment where you can be your authentic true self, like you say, it just does flow, like our conversation right now.
totally, totally. I think that's a shift for a lot of females.
Yeah.
Maybe males too, I don't know. But specifically, I know it's a mind shift for females. But when that happens, and I think the newer generation does not have those issues as much as the older generation.
Mm.
And I'm calling myself the older
Me
generation.
too,
But
me too. Because we've been trained
but
to be this certain way. We were trained to be this certain way in business. Like you had to do it this way
right.
to do it that way. So we're kind of breaking down all these old patterns of how we've always been told we had to behave.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree.
Mm,
Totally agree.
mm. So tell me, what do you see then as the biggest opportunity? So if we talk about this AI from a it could lead us to being more perfect. When you're working with your founders in your side hustle, what are you kind of really, what's the biggest thing you're focusing on with them right now? Is it around this authentic piece? Like, I mean, obviously it's getting their customer messaging, etc. right. But what's the biggest thing to future-proof them and future-proof their business that you would say is your main focus? Or is there other things that you're focusing on with them?
Yeah. So I think I right now I'm focusing more on top of the funnel.
Hmm.
Um, that, but I have experience in both. But with top of the funnel, it's like once you have the messaging, how do you execute that, right? And I think putting together a lead generation engine that can create leads for you, and then once you have that set and you're seeing results, automating that. I
Yeah.
think that's what you leave with them, right? And then they can go to just continue with that established automated machine. What I see, unfortunately, is everyone wants the automated machine, but no one wants them to do the manual work to begin with.
Oh my gosh.
And
Again, breath of fresh
you're
air hearing
laughing,
this. No,
yeah,
I'm here. I'm loving this
yeah.
because I mean, I'm like, finally, someone else is, because that's how I feel. I have to learn it first. I have to manually understand it to then automate it. But I quite often get told, you just need to automate, you just need to do this and that. But I'm like, but then if I don't understand it, how am I actually going to then authentically deliver it?
And if you don't do the work and make sure that it is what you want, you're amplifying bad stuff.
Hmm.
Or it could be bad stuff. It's not necessarily bad stuff. So a lot of times people will come to me and they're like, "Oh, I tried A, B, and C," and I was like, "A, B, and C being some automated system," and I was like, "Well, what are the components, and did it work manually?" They're like, "Oh, yeah, 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 it works," but then you come to realize that it didn't work at all. They didn't even try it before. They just plunk it in here and then expect that AI is like the silver bullet,
Yeah.
and it's not. It can automate what you already have, and if what you already have is producing results, it's going to amplify those results. If what it has is creating garbage, then you've just created a like
Okay.
10 times the garbage
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
had
So,
before.
so on that, in terms of we're in a hyper distractive world, right? And we've got so many things being thrown at us. And I think about this even from being a consumer myself. You're a consumer. With the founders you work with, do you also, and as part of your methodology, is it about less is more when you talk about top of the funnel and then executing, like rather than scattergun, going everywhere? Like, what's your view on keeping it simple?
Yeah, very, very insightful. Um, I think there's too much right now out there, like we talked about, bloated market that's out there. And I think as a new founder, a lot of people they're not 100% where they sure where they fall. And so with their product, even though they have product market fit, they're like, everyone could use this. But what happens is when you do that, the message that really comes out is they don't fit for anyone because there's no one specific. So a lot of times it's like a customer will say, "Oh, this is a horizontal solution. It'll fit across all industries." And like, pick an industry. They're like, "No, it'll fit across all of them." I'm like, pick an industry. Let's figure out how to go to market for that specific industry, get the strategy, get the tactics, and then what you're going to have is a blueprint so you can go to the next industry and the next industry and the next industry.
Ah.
So, what's really important to me is, especially at the beginning, you don't want volume. Everyone thinks they want volume, you don't. You just want it to be simple, like you said, simplify it down, make sure it works, see where iterate because you're going to have to iterate in this first process. Once you have that blueprint, then you can go to town with the other
Yeah, it's really
areas.
interesting that in terms of, pick an industry because, I know I've done this too, where you're like, oh, I can work across the various industries because of my backgrounds, like probably like you, right? Like
Yeah,
my advertising marketing background, I worked across so many different industries, like automotive, FMCG, utilities. So I think that I can go and apply my product across all these different industries. But what I'm hearing loud and clearly is pick an industry and get the blueprint so that you can then wrap it across the others. That is a
yeah.
mindset set shift in itself, even for me, because I get asked that and I'm like, well, what industry is it? And I'm like, ooh, like I have to quickly question myself about it. How do you, in terms of that question, is when like does anyone ever get blocked on pick an industry? And would you recommend it's if it's an industry that you're well versed in, or like pick an industry that you might be passionate about? Like, what's your view on how to pick an industry as well?
I always suggest that it's data driven. Like, let's understand the market. Like,
Okay.
you could pick two different industries, right? I'm making this up. You
Yeah.
could choose financial services or you could choose automotive. And maybe when you're looking, this a financial services industry, it's booming, right? You can see the market like continuing to grow at exponential rates and it's predicted to continue to grow. And then you see the automotive industry, and maybe it's not growing. Maybe it's becoming very stagnant. Don't pick the automotive industry. Pick the industry that will be able to support that growth because then the potential is so much higher there
Yeah.
when you're going to market. So that's what my suggestion is really focus on the industry that's going to provide you the most opportunity. Now, what I will say is if someone is an expert in automotive, then maybe that would make more sense. But if everything is equal, I would say go based upon the data because that is going to provide you the most opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I love the fact that we've talked about this need to be authentic, understanding your ICP, but that data also plays a really crucial role as well. It's like we've got this AI piece, we've got this human piece, and then it's kind of understanding that data. What would you say, or what would be your top three tips for anyone starting their own business, a founder in terms of, where to start? I know we've covered off a lot, but what would be your top three tips to suggest to them?
So I guess my first thing would be to a lot of people, including me at times, they let fear get in the way. We talked about this right at the beginning, or the imposter syndrome
Yeah.
and everything.
Yeah.
Everyone has it.
Oh gosh, I know.
Absolutely everyone has it. Um, it is really hard sometimes to send that first LinkedIn message or that
Mm.
post or getting your product out there. Just do it. Just do it. That action will move you forward.
Mm.
Because I see a lot of founders, or some founders anyway, that they're waiting for the perfect time, the perfect people to be there, or the perfect whatever. But and then they keep waiting, and then the time's over.
Yeah.
So just take action. So that would be number one. The second would be focus on what you said, which is get a perspective of what your product is and start testing things.
Mm.
There are so many ways. You don't have to, like the stuff that I talked about with ICP and value propositions, that actually helps you to even see if your product is viable. Like
Yeah.
you can use those types of tools to see that you have that
Mm.
product market fit.
Mm.
And third, and I don't know if it's the same where you are as it is here in the US, but every founder I know, they chase funding. They're all about funding. 80% of their time is focused on, where am I going to get my funding? Where am I going to get my funding? Stop focusing on where you're going to get your funding. Because if you focus on getting a revenue generating engine, you will have built momentum in your business. And the VCs that are giving you funding, that's what they care about,
Yeah.
because you've shown that you are viable
Yeah.
without them giving you funding.
Yeah.
And the funding that they end up giving you will be higher with less equity because you showed value.
Yeah. No, that's a
So
really
those
good
are the
point.
three.
No, thank you. That just do it, take the action and, focus on what you need to focus on here and now. I think calling out even the VC piece, yeah, a lot of businesses here, they're sort of seeking funding, etc. For me, and I've had to learn this as well, is get your ego out the way, focus on the 1%ers each day and slowly build, slow and steady wins the race is my thing. And I'm a high performer. I know obviously you are. And, sometimes we chase this success and we want to be here, and yet we're here. And then we're like, well, how come I'm not here yet? And so we're kind of going for these bigger things, but it's a journey, isn't it? Like it is an absolute journey. And I think the more that we can, you know, also just what's the word? Just basically just be okay with where we're at and not compare ourselves to everybody else. And even like, when we talk about a bloated market, I think that's what's important also for me in terms of my own journey as a founder.
That's amazing. Thank you for having me on your show.
No, thank you. And where can we find out more about you, Colleen, in terms of, yeah, where can we look for more about you and what you're doing in the world?
Yeah, I think the best way to reach me is through LinkedIn, and it's Colleen Pimentel. Sorry, I just I
I'll
couldn't
put it
remember
in
if
my
there was an
notes.
M in it. Yeah, please, thank you. But it's Colleen Pimentel. I also have a website, McKenna Pimentel Consulting,
Yep.
but LinkedIn is the best way to reach out to me.
Okay, well, thank you. And you have a wonderful, I think it's evening for you. Is that right? It's evening? Yeah,
It
it's
is. It
yeah.
is.
All right. Well, you have a wonderful evening and thank you very much.
Thank you, B.
Take care.